Hey, this is Zeke from CodeForDesigners.com. I'm here with another Level Up Friday. Level Up Fridays are free bite-sized tutorials designed to help you improve as a coder over the course of your lunch break. Today's episode is all about creating cards. You see these things all over the internet. For Trello, they're the cornerstone of their product. Everything you touch is a card. But you see them in other places too. Firefox has them on their new tabs page. Google, when you look at the top stories carousel on Google search, that's going to show you a bunch of cards as well. And the list just goes on. Along the way, we're going to have some fun using two of my favorite tricks for images. One is object fit. It's going to help you make sure that your images, no matter what size container they're in, or if they're on mobile or wherever they appear, that they're going to feel art directed, even when you put them directly on the page without any JavaScript. The other is using this trick of intrinsic aspect ratio to size your images proportionally the way you want. If you're following along with me, there's a link to the starter code pen in the description. Just go ahead and open that up. You'll be able to copy that and get started. It just contains a few beginning styles, so you can really focus on getting this achieved quickly and seeing what you can do with it and not fussing with text setup and things like that. So in CodePen, what you want to do is just go ahead and hit the fork button. That'll make a copy, and now you can just change the title to be whatever you want. I'm just going to change this to work in progress for now. But you could rename this to be whatever you want it to be. Now, the way I'm going to structure my card is to first start off with a link. And I'm not going to link to anywhere particular. I'm just going to use the hash sign for now. And I'm going to give everything a class of card. And let's close that tag. Inside of my card, I know that I'm going to need something to wrap this image with. So I'm going to create something called card media. There we go. And let's close that div. Let's create, and now let's, inside of that, put our image. And I'll leave the source blank for now. Let's come back in a moment to that, but let's just add our class, and that'll be card media image. We also know we want some content, so let's go ahead and create our content area. I'm going to call that card content. Pretty unique name. And let's just add a headline. Headline, our card. And then I want to fill it with some text. Now, something I really like about CodePen is it contains a lot of helpers for you. If you're prototyping and you just want to fill some things with images or lorem ipsum text just so you can kind of see what's going on. So I'm just going to type lorem and hit tab, and that's going to give me a bunch of lorem ipsum filler text. That's cool. That's exactly kind of what I'm looking for here. Now, I mentioned images as well for filler content, so let's actually go find one. You'll see this little assets button down here. Let's just go ahead and click that. And if you click on the Photos tab, you'll see that they have a bunch of photos you can pick up if you just wanted to use one. I happen to have an image from Pexels picked out for me because I think this is a good example. So I just went ahead and copied that URL and dropped it in. And let's just go ahead and close that. So now you see we've got this really incredibly kind of big image. Don't worry, we'll fix that. But we have our headline to our card, which isn't really styled yet, and some text. This is where we should be right now with our HTML. So let's open up our CSS tab and see what we have going on. You'll see I have a few variables stored at the top. I've got a few other things declared. One of them is heading, so I'm just going to grab that. And that's a class I'm going to use for this card heading here. And you can see that that changed our headline a little bit. I also have something called L-centered. This is just a little bit of a layout class to center things on a page so that we can see them better. I'm just going to go ahead up to the top and add that class as well. And tap everything out a bit and close that div. So that's kind of centered. You see our image is overflowing a little bit. That's okay. We will fix that in a moment. Okay, so the place I want to start here is by establishing that bigger outer card wrapper. There's only a few things I want to take care of right away. The first being links by default are displayed inline. It's okay to use them like a sort of like a box, but they're gonna by default behave more like bold text or something. They really don't want to be a box that you can kind of move things around in. So I'm gonna go ahead and change that. The other thing I want to do is add a white background just so that it pops a little bit off of the sort of lighter gray of this particular background. And last but not least, I just want to go ahead and apply just a little bit of a box shadow, again, just to kind of raise it off the back a little bit. I like working with them, especially when you can keep them kind of nice, light, and tasteful. So I'm going to jump into card, and to change the way that the link is displayed, I'm just going to add display block. You won't see it right away, but this is going to give us the ability to resize, our text and for it to behave more like a div. And then I also want to change the background. I just want to put it on a white background. 3 Fs will do it there. And last but not least, let's go ahead and add that box shadow. Now, I write a lot of box shadows, so this is kind of one I'm very familiar with. But it's a nice kind of light-ish box shadow. You can kind of see it come into place here. Just enough to kind of pull it off the page. If you're not familiar with RGBA, that last value is referring to opacity. The scale goes from 0, which is transparent, to 1, which is opaque. We'll do a few more things to the main kind of card element here, but I want to circle back around to that after we've had a chance to rework the image a little bit so that it's sized a little nicer and do some stuff with our text. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the intrinsic image ratio deal that we kind of talked about. It's a complicated sounding concept, but it really isn't. Effectively, what you want to be able to do is have your images scale at a ratio that you kind of set. So if you think about shrinking down like a 16:9 image, which is kind of the standard size for ratio for video at this point, you'd want that to kind of scale all at the same percentage, no matter what the width of the thing is. That's what I'm kind of talking about here. Just imagine taking a video, taking an image, maybe something that's a 4:3 ratio or 16:9 ratio, or whatever ratio you really want to set, and scaling that down. The way this works with CSS is a little tricky. Effectively, what you want to do is set the padding top of an element and its sub-element, sort of reposition that so it responds to the right container. But by setting padding top and removing any other height, the actual container itself, the child element, is going to scale to that aspect ratio that you set, to that percentage you set on padding top. I know it sounds a little complicated, and believe me, it's complicated to explain, but actually when you see it, it's pretty easy and it's a cool trick. So the first thing we're going to do is actually jump down to card media, and I'll give us a little bit more room here for our CSS. So as we jump into card media, the first thing we want to do is set our padding up. Just like I talked about, we really just want to set our padding top to a percentage that is going to be our aspect ratio. Now, if you're doing 16 by 9 images or video or something like that, that's going to translate to 56.25%. How did I get that number? It's actually pretty simple. When you consider 16 by 9, 16 is referring to the width of the element, and the 9 is referring to the height. So for every 16 units wide, it's going to be 9 units tall, whatever those units end up being. So to figure out the math, really all we have to do is divide 9 by 16. That's going to give us 0.5625, or 56.25%. Who says math isn't fun? I do. The other thing we need to do now is set our height to 0. And we also need to set our position to relative, because we're going to reposition our image. Now, for our image, let's just change its position to absolute. Move it to the top 0, left 0. By doing the position relative and then the position absolute on the image, we've now made the position be relative to the parent card media instead of the entire document. Last but not least, let's just set our height to 0, our width also, not height 0, height 100%, and our width to 100%. And boom, now you see a 16 by 9 aspect ratio image. And I'll show you as you shrink it, that continues. Right? It's always going to be behaving against that percentage. Now this is really great for if you had a video in an iframe or something and you wanted to make sure that scaled well. I'm using it for an image here. And what I particularly like about this trick is now you can start to change this based on your media queries. Right, so maybe in this example, maybe what you're saying is, on my little tiny browser, my mobile device, 16 by 9 feels kind of right as an aspect ratio because it's not occupying as much height. But when you get to those bigger screens, maybe the ratio you want is something like 4:3. As a percentage, that's going to be 75%. Again, just 3 divided by 4. But you see now as we sort of shrink our thing down and grow it, well, it's not quite working yet because I missed one underscore. Let's add that second underscore. There we go. So now you see the 4:3. This is when it's 16 by 9. You can build up big, make it 4:3 again. That's spectacular. You could really make this change based on device types. There's a bunch of different media queries you can use. So right now I know what you're thinking. Yeah, Zeke, this intrinsic aspect ratio thing is cool, but you stretch out my image. That's kind of gross. I thought you were a designer. You're absolutely right. I'm not going to leave it this way. This is where the object fit comes in. It's going to allow us to make sure the image remains at its natural sort of scale and ratio, but also covers this whole area we've defined already. It's going to stay within that box. So it'll cut off some of the top if it needs to, cut off some of the left if it needs to, but fill the whole area. So to do that, there's a new CSS property called object fit. I'm just going to, don't need to capitalize that. Object fit. And I'm just going to use cover. This is really most of the use case. And you can see it's no longer being stretched. And you can really see it when it's down here. Now, the property I like to use this in combination with is something called object position. And what it's going to do is actually give you that ability to somewhat art direct the photos. And you can see this in action. what I've done is told it, I want you to always keep the right edge and bottom edge in place. So as I play around with this image, you'll see that it's cutting off the top of the image where this little chandelier is. It's even getting kind of down on the wall. But the bottom right is always in place. Now, if I told it to stay to the top, you could see it kind of jump and move. You could also give it the property center. It would try to keep the photo centered and to the right. You can also tell it to do the left. Now, I like this set of properties. I'm going to keep it on the right bottom. You know, if you're playing around with something like Squarespace, you see that they have these focal points that you can kind of drop on images. This is doing pretty much kind of the same thing. It's not as exact and precise. They're using JavaScript to make that happen. But look at what you could do with just CSS. That's really cool to me. Of course, anything cool in CSS comes with a few caveats. Most of the time, those caveats have to do with Internet Explorer not supporting it. Lo and behold, Internet Explorer really doesn't. I'm using a site called Can I Use to just look up the support across browsers for this property because it is relatively new. You can see there are a few known issues with Microsoft Edge 16 and 17. Those are the most recent versions. But it is partially supported. That problem with Edge right now is Object Fit really only supports the image tag, which is not a problem for us. That's exactly what we're using it on. So with that little bit of CSS and HTML, we're almost done. I want to add a little bit of padding right here to my card content so that it feels a little nicer. The other thing I'd like to do is now when I kind of hover over the top of this card, we know it's a link, so my text turns blue. I've already got a few styles in place to do that. But I also want to add an effect to this card so that when people hover over it, they really know they're hovering over it, or if they're using keyboard focus or something like that. To do that, I'm going to go back to my box shadow. Because you know me, I love box shadows for some reason. And I'm just going to copy it in place. What I really like about box shadow is you can set multiple box shadows. So what I'm going to do is set a second box shadow. I'm going to not offset it. I'm not going to give it any X or Y. I'm not going to give it any blur, but I am going to spread it out a little bit more. So that's going to be like a really solid line. And I'm then going to just give it, the RGBA again. The 3 zeros are going to give me blacks and a little transparency. You'll see what it looks like when I hover over it now. It looks almost kind of like it's outlined, which I think is kind of really nice. Last but not least, let's add a little bit of a transition there so that it's not just popping back and forth. We're going to add that to the box shadow. And we're going to say 0.2 seconds, and I'm just going to use the built-in easing from the browser. Cool, you see it, and it feels kind of like it grows when you hover over it. I like that effect. It really, to me, kind of feels like it's in focus. But there's a ton of other things you could do here. That's it for this episode. Go out and have some fun making cards. I think these things are all over the internet, but they're all over the internet for a good reason. That compact little module to help sort of preview content, whether it's for an ad or for a new tab like you see on Firefox, or for an article, or maybe it's even the source of your entire content. These things are really cool, and you're going to see them all over, so have some fun making it. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out, either through the @CodeForDesigners Twitter or the Facebook page. I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I possibly can. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, please do. That helps me know that I'm creating content that you like. And most of all, happy coding.